Welcome back to Legacy Wealth 1322. On this channel, I teach regenerative ranchers and farmers how to be way more profitable, but only when you do it in alignment with God's will. On this episode, we're going to actually do a little backtracking because I realized after the last video that there were some things I wanted to make a little bit clearer, because once you understand this and get it down, it is a game changer, because increasing profitability was one of the two highest priorities that were identified in some recent Ag Steward Summits that Jared Sorensen hosts. And I'm going to demonstrate to you that once you understand how to play the game to win, where you're in control, it is an absolute game changer. So here's the thing. When we talked about the process of doing your traditional banking, you are not in control. And I'm not trying to be ugly or disrespectful or anything else. I'm just talking about the basic facts, because the traditional antiquated procedure for getting access to operating capital, going to your lenders and bankers and so forth, is that you're going to go in there hat in hand, and you're going to pray that you're going to be able to give that banker enough confidence that you've got the collateral to back up making sure that he gets his money, okay? But he's going to dictate to you all the terms of that thing, and that means that he's going to be able to tell you what the interest rate's going to be. He's going to tell you what the payment amounts to. He's going to tell you when the payment is due, and if you mess up on any of that stuff, he's not worried, because he's got the collateral, which might include all the way up to and including your entire operation. As collateral that you'll pay that money back. He's going to get his money whether you do or not. Okay, that's not in control. I'm teaching you an alternative where you are in total control, because none of that garbage applies, other than the insurance companies with the IBC banking alternative. They dictate the interest rate once a year, and currently that's in the 5 to 6% range. So how's that? Okay, but now here's the thing. This doesn't even make sense for a lot of people, but I want you to understand very, very clearly, every single purchase that you ever make, that anybody ever makes, is always financed. Now, what do I mean by that? Because you might think, well, you are absolutely nuts, David. You don't even have a clue what I do, because I'm successful enough, I'm profitable enough, and I don't pay a dime of interest to borrow anybody's money, because I pay cash, okay? But here's the deal. Everybody understands that in a traditional lending situation, to use somebody else's money, you pay interest to them. But what people don't understand is that when you use your own money by paying cash, you lose the interest that could have been generated if you hadn't had to spend that money, all right? That's why I was showing you this graph that I call the zero line, because on the top lines in there where it shows the debtor, it's red, and what's happening is kind of stair steps in reverse, that you dig a hole when you go into debt, and then gradually you claw your way out step by step until you get back up to the debt's all paid off and you're at ground zero once more, okay? So that's where you're spending money, it's costing you money, and you do that every single time in a traditional sense, that most operators are caught in that debt cycle. And by the way, that's obviously not the biblical idea, because God only wants us to be in debt to him, okay? But on that graph, the black line is the reverse, and it is a bunch of stair steps that go up, and then when you make the purchase, it drops down to zero, to that zero line once again, because here's a situation that the money that was in your account is obviously not able to generate any more ongoing interest. And that's where I'm saying that indirectly you're financing that purchase, because in this case, you're not paying money, but you are in fact losing money. That is not something that you have to keep on putting up with. And once you understand the impact of that long term, where we're not talking about, you remember the penny doubled graph, and it was showing that, a penny doubled for 28 days is the first time when that money, gets to be over $1 million. And that's powerful. But 2 days later, that compounding on a doubling basis has made that amount of money in excess of $5 million. But again, we're going to emphasize the fact that when you understand, this banking alternative, we're not talking about doing that doubling situation and compounding interest. We're talking about uninterrupted compounding interest that is working literally for the rest of your entire lifetime. And when you do it in alignment with Proverbs 13:22, which God wants you to understand, is that it says, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So we're not talking about just a few days, weeks, or months, or even years. We're talking about lifetimes, and not just your lifetime, because when you do this right, it meets the second of the highest priorities that were identified in Jared Sorensen's Ag Steward Summits of legacy planning. Because I don't know an operator at this point that doesn't want to pass on his productive, profitable operation to the next generation, because it is in fact in alignment with God's will. But the problem is that until you do that profitably, you're missing out on doing something that you want to do that is in alignment with God's will, and that shouldn't be happening. It doesn't need to happen. And if you'll follow the steps that I'm teaching in this biblical wealth building course, you're going to find out how simple it is and how profitable it is to do things in alignment with God's will. That's why I open up these videos every time by saying, in alignment with God's will. Okay. So now here's the thing that I want to basically get across on this whole process is that once you get a handle on this whole idea of compounding interest, ask yourself a simple question, just a real simple question. How much interest is involved in your operation, either based on traditional lending practices where you're paying interest to use somebody else's money, or the non-traditional way of paying cash and losing the interest? Because that is going to be a monstrous number when you look at how much interest is actually involved to run your operation, and do it on a profitable basis. Because whether you're using your own money, because you're successful and you're profitable and you can pay cash for things, well, yeah, that's a good thing in a traditional sense. But it is not a good thing when you realize how much interest you are literally losing every single time you pay cash and lose the ability for that money to continue generating interest. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you, that it is a monstrous amount of money. Because when you use that in a banking alternative, the IBC concept I'm trying to teach you here, you're going to realize that it's not just compounding interest for a short period of time. It's not just money generating 4% interest. Because when you do something productive with that money, put it back into your operation where you're already skilled and experienced, generating 10, 15, 20, 30% returns on your capital. That's where I'm saying to you, let that sink in. It is a mind-boggling amount of money that you're walking away from, that your family and your heirs are missing out on because you're not operating in alignment with God's will in terms of profitability. Okay? So now this is going to be a shorter version than generally speaking, but I want to get this kind of wrapped up, and I want to end with a couple of points here to get you really focused on the impact that is an option available to you if you will be bold enough to step out of the herd, be a herd quitter and do things in alignment with God's will. Because here's what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to read this because this is important. Ask yourself this question. How many people are going to miss out on what God has planned for you and your family if you don't figure this out? And more importantly, act on it. Okay? Now, point number 2. Try to deny this if you think I'm crazy. But listen to this. Your family deserves the very best that God intends for you, but they're only going to get His best if you get it to them by partnering with Him in total alignment with His will. Okay? So we're going to wrap this one up. And I want to make this really, really clear, because I'm on your side. I am fighting for you every tooth and nail along the way. And I'm going to do everything in my God-given power to make you profitable, but only when you do it in ways that are going to be outside your current comfort zone, because there are literally thousands of operators that are already doing what I'm trying to teach you here with this infinite banking alternative. But the ag marketplace is notorious for being very stubborn, and they're always asking, well, if this is so great, how come I haven't heard about it before? Okay, and this sounds too good to be true, so it's got to be a scam. Well, we all know what to do when that's true, but this is not a scam, because like I'm saying, it's been done by thousands of operators before you that are already successfully doing what I'm trying to teach here. So we're going to get back on course, next week, when I'm going to talk about the second, of these operating priorities on the legacy planning side of this, and show you what a superior alternative, the IBC banking alternative, amounts to. So be sure and come back next week. But in the meantime, like and subscribe to this. And as long as you're at this point, click on the link here to get a copy of my free ebook, Regenerative Operator. Can you be trusted with biblical wealth? Now, there are those of you who are going to say, listen, that sounds like a decent opportunity, but I'll tell you what, I'm not big on reading stuff. And so here's what the deal is. I am literally in the process of creating an audio version of that, so that you won't even have to read a book. But anyway, I want you to get the information and apply this stuff, because this is not my thinking. It's not something I dreamed up. It's not a scam. It's been around since the early 1980s. And the traction it's generating is getting to be very costly if you're not on that wagon. Okay. So with that said, we'll see you next time. In the meantime, be blessed.